Well, welcome to Points of Change Live. Today, I am joined by a good friend and an amazing coach, a super badass business consultant and speaker, a trusted advisor, and a really solid person all around, Dana Pharant. Hi, Dana. We're going to be getting into it, talking about difficult conversations and how to handle difficult conversations very shortly. Let's just roll the titles and then we're going to get right into it. I love doing that. Dana, welcome to Points of Change. It's great to be speaking with you.
Oh, you too, John. I was so excited about this. I always love hanging out with you. You have like the best way for interviewing people. You really make somebody feel so relaxed and welcome. So, yay!
Oh, I'm really pleased about that. Sometimes I think maybe I'm very laid back, and I sometimes notice people and think, I'm big on teaching people about energy and managing their energy and coming across well online, because I see so many people who are just kind of a bit flat. And they do well and they put a lot of content out, but there's no real energy there. It's like maybe they've worn themselves out from creating all the content. I don't know, but the energy stuff is so important, and I hope that even though I'm fairly laid back and relaxed, that I aim to still bring some good energy to stuff that I do as well. And I know you do too, right? You're great at that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's, maybe they're tired from being on Clubhouse for too long. We were just talking about that before we went live. But there really is something to managing your energy and really, refining what's important. Now, I know that's not in the topic that we're going to talk about, but, in all the things that we do, we need to make choices because there's so many options, and standing firm in what's right for us, what works for us as individuals.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I'm loving Clubhouse, and it was great to talk to you about it. But I'm definitely not spending too much time on there. And we both think we're seeing a lot of people who seem to be on there like all day, every day, which is quite astounding. But no doubt it's a great thing to be on and exploring at the moment. Who knows where it'll go, if it'll last, if it'll burn out quickly. But it's been a bit exciting at least, and something new and different. I don't want to spend too much time on Clubhouse though, but thank you, Dominic, for your comment. We both have great, amazing energy. That's really great to hear. And well, we're here to talk about navigating difficult conversations. Dana, why are you the person to speak to about navigating difficult conversations?
Okay, so a little bit of background if people watching don't know who I am. I spent 6 years as a dominatrix, and in that world, you have to first and foremost have a very difficult conversation about what do you want to explore, what's okay, what's not okay, and getting into like minute details. And oftentimes people who would come to me, they've got these things they want to explore. It doesn't feel comfortable to talk about it. It's like it's taboo. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe there's something wrong with me. And so there's all of this going on in having that in-depth conversation that is vital in order to keep somebody safe inside the dungeon. So that's a lot of where my pieces have come from. And then, having run a 7-figure business, I was always the person who handled the most difficult clients in the business. So, when their complaints couldn't be answered by my staff, I was always the one escalated of like, this person's, and I would be able to turn them around and have them become a raving fan. So going from I hate you to, wow, let me tell my friends. So I have some skills when it comes to being able to navigate difficult conversations.
Unique skills as well.
Very unique.
Really unique. I certainly don't know anyone who has anything like as close to the sort of profile and experiences that you do. And I was a big fan before we even spoke. I mean, we were introduced by the lovely Cindy Ashton, yes. And you will remember, I'm sure, the very first time we spoke, I was like giddy with excitement, and probably not for the reasons anyone watching things. I just couldn't wait to speak to you because it was so fascinating to me that you're doing what you're doing and that you were talking about these experiences, and a big part of what you do is bringing that sort of, dominant energy, the dominatrix energy, into what people do, increasing confidence. Is confidence then a critical part of being able to navigate difficult conversations?
I would say it helps. I don't think it's critical. I would say what is much more critical in a difficult conversation is being willing to get out of the way. So being willing to put all of your stuff on the shelf, so to speak. And so you put your emotions, you put your judgments, you put all the things that you have about that other person, including expectations of where the conversation needs to go. When you can move that out and step into a space of just being super curious, like, okay, so this is what's going on, tell me your side of it. When we can get to that spot internally, that's the biggest thing that makes the shift. Now, there's a lot that goes on to getting to that space that we can talk about, but that is probably the single most critical aspect to having a difficult conversation.
What then are the kinds of difficult conversations people most struggle with, do you think?
I would say, so I work a lot with business owners. I love, the business mindset and all of those things. And I would say the biggest one for most of my clients is in around having a client who's really upset. Say you took on, I work with a lot of coaches, and let's say they took on a client who paid them $50,000 and they get partway in and the client is not happy with the delivery or something. And there's the threat of, I'm going to do a chargeback on my credit card, or, there's something that comes up, and being able to step in when you've got, $50,000 sitting on the line, that's where it gets harder to actually get yourself out of the way and drop back into that place of, curious and, how else can we deal with this? What else is going on? Asking lots of questions.
In professional environments and in my years of experience in coaching, where I've tended to encounter people talking about having these difficult conversations has been in kind of giving direct feedback to people, not necessarily clients, but sometimes even within their own businesses. And I sometimes talk about, like, my very first experience of that was I was a bar manager. Like, one of my first full-time positions was as a bar manager, and I was in charge of a group of young people, not much younger than myself at the time, but I was expected to keep their show rolling. Now, most people knew what they were doing. It was pretty easy to do. And then we brought in a new lad, and he was very good, very eager worker. But there was this one issue. He had this appalling body odor, and all of the other staff kept complaining to me about it. And that ended up being the difficult conversation that I had to have with him about, what more difficult conversation could you have than saying to someone, we have a bit of an issue because, people are noticing your body odor, or I need to do something about it. Anyway, I did it as nicely and gently as possible. I even felt so bad, I even bought a can of deodorant, which, looking back, that probably was probably made it worse. But I honestly didn't think he was going to come back again after that, but he did, and bless him, that he dealt with it. The issue was done. I was like, oh, thank goodness for that. But it could so easily have gone sideways, that conversation.
Well, and this is such a great example. So in that situation, the pieces that are going through your mind, I would imagine, are, how well is he going to take it? Is he going to react badly? Is he going to be offended? And this is the thing, that when we have all of those preconceived ideas about what's going to happen, then we make it difficult, because the actual circumstance is just, hey, do you realize that you have bad body odor? That's really all that needs to be said. And then they get to say yes or no, and you're like, oh, okay, well, perhaps you're not smelling it, or maybe you don't have a sense of smell, or whatever it is, but we can all smell it, and we're in a food industry, and so you need to deal with it. That's it, right? Like, the reality is, it doesn't have to be a difficult conversation. What makes it difficult is those pieces that we make up in our brain about how they're going to perceive it, how they're going, right? Is he going to come back? All those thoughts and worries. But when we let go of those and we just deal with what is right in front of us, it stops becoming cult.
Yeah. I spent, that's some of my background. I spent nearly 12 years working in the airline industry as well. So I stayed in the hospitality theme for a long time. And so I was cabin crew for 12 years, and I had a lot of those kinds of interactions with people, but, both with not having to tell people about body odor so much, thankfully, but certainly awkward conversations, or having to very much face up and front up to people, both in professional colleagues and passengers and customer facing sort of situations. It can be difficult. I think one of the things that I learned most from that has always stayed with me is that, to a greater degree, depending on what you actually have to deliver, you can say almost anything if you've got a smile on your face. Would you agree?
A smile, and I would go further, because there's the, hey, you look so nice today, right? Like, I'm smiling, but it's sarcastic. So
Right.
I would say it's an internal smile. It's that piece where you like, okay, so let's find some joy, that I feel some joy, and genuinely let that come out. And then it is that playful energy and approaching it of like, hey, this person's probably going to take it better than I think they're going to take it. And then you can bring that feeling up and show it, definitely showing it on your face, because people do respond on a physiological level when you smile. Like, you look at what happens, baby smiles, and what happens to everybody. Everybody smiles, but the baby smile is innocent. It is pure. It's not looking at you and going, oh, your eyebrows are a little crooked. Well, I'll smile at you anyway, right? They're not doing that. And that's the difference, is getting to this place where we can show up and just, let that feeling of joy come through, the feeling of, love and kind of compassion for other people. I think maybe compassion is a better place to go rather than loving persons. But
but I think in these kinds of, when you have to have a difficult conversation with someone, you have to maybe deliver some feedback that isn't particularly good, or you've had a complaint that you have to address, or something like that, it automatically is a little bit awkward. So I do think the energy you go into in terms of how you encounter it is going to be important. But so much of that does depend on the person you are going to be speaking to. In some situations that may not be known, but in some circumstances you might, and it might actually be not just a difficult conversation, but a difficult person.
Yeah. So there are definitely, people who are difficult in and of themselves, for maybe it's genetic, maybe it's just, they're hardwired in that way, or maybe they've had a lot of challenges going on in their life. And so they approach everything with that lens of everybody's out to get me. And in those pieces, I think that's where, discernment of, is this, a difficult personality that's never going to change? In which case, just, let go of trying to convince them, let go of needing for them to get it. And for the people who have the lens of, seeing that the world is out to get them, that kind of perspective, lots of compassion, and, gently just, letting them know that there's like, what if I'm not actually out to get you? Just leaving that, but not having to convince. Again, we don't need to convince them entirely of our point of view. They're okay if they're mad at us, and the really difficult people, it's okay if they never get it and they're always mad at us. So having space for the difficult conversation not to be fully resolved. And this is the thing, is that when we go in, letting go of our expectation of how that needs to come out, navigating, I would say the successful navigating of a difficult conversation is not about having the successful outcome per se, but you coming out of it feeling still solid about who you are. That's what I consider successful, because when you're aiming for that, then you have the best chance of having that quote unquote successful outcome.
So some of the difficult conversations are not just always difficult to deliver. Sometimes they can be difficult to receive as well. And I know that in my experience as a Toastmaster and going to public speaking clubs, you really do put yourself in a situation there where you have to very quickly get comfortable with feedback, and to get over the sort of taking stuff personally. And not everyone does. Some people come and go very quickly in the clubs because of that, because people don't like people take it personally. People
Mhm.
feel attacked or criticized when they're just getting feedback. There are great ways of delivering more professional feedback, and I certainly have learned some of them, I hope, and I think I do a pretty good job now in those situations and environments of delivering positive feedback. But I see both ends of the spectrum, with some people who deliver feedback that's so nice and so gentle because they don't want to upset anyone at all, that
Right.
it's meaningless.
Yes.
Or some people that will list off everything that's wrong, and it's this whole sort of liturgy of errors and mistakes in a speech. And again, with too much of that, or just too much information in the feedback, again, it becomes meaningless. It's like, well, what am I actually supposed to remember? Then there's the people who do what I usually call the shit sandwich, which is either something good, something really bad, something good, and which again I think is a really terrible way of delivering feedback. But I think that's what, if you ask people about delivering feedback, that's the one most people know.
Mhm.
Do you have any pointers on actually delivering and receiving as a professional feedback?
Yeah, I think you need to think about the person who's receiving it. If you do know them at all, to consider, what is their style? What are they going to respond to? So it's kind of like, thinking in terms of, the 5 love languages. We maybe need the 5 languages of feedback,
Yeah.
because for some people, they really need that shit sandwich, because it's like, when you say to them, hey, I really love that you did this, then they're like, oh, I feel good. And they kind of open up, and then they can receive that little piece of, and I would really love to see you do this better. And then, and I also liked this. So that works for certain people. And I would say it's the people who really love the praise. They're more what I would call the celebrity style personality. They
Yeah.
love to be center stage, and they are larger than life. And tracking my tree, those people absolutely do the shit sandwich. For somebody like me, who is a driven personality, I'm like, get to the freaking point. Okay.
Yeah.
Just, give me 1 or 2 nuggets. Don't give me the laundry list. And then, other people, you need to be really soft. If people are in a place where they're really, really hurting, you're going to need to nudge it very, very gently. So
Right.
I think understanding who the receiver is going to be important. And you can kind of gauge that by, sometimes it's by experience. In your club, you may not know that initially, but you kind of watch out for cues of, is it that person who's always kind of, pulled in? Maybe they tend to, stand a little bit hunched over. Well, be really gentle with those people. But the people who
Yeah.
are like larger than life, pump them up, give them the shit, pump them up again. Okay. So
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, probably in most professional settings, you get the opportunity to have that conversation privately. And then I'm talking about a conversation that actually happens in front of a whole room full of people, or currently in a whole Zoom room full of people.
Right.
But it's a public conversation. And so one of the things that really matters in being able to give feedback, I think feedback that is actually useful and helpful, is definitely you want to highlight the good stuff, and I always say end on the best, end on the thing you like the most about what they did. But drop in a few of the things. Here's where there's some room for improvement, and but not to actually address the person directly themselves. Talk to everybody, because the whole point in those situations is the feedback is actually for everybody. It's just saying that this is what I observed in your speech, but there's something, everyone can learn something from this. So you don't act, you're not supposed to directly address the person, but talk to the
Yeah.
room. And when I
Yeah.
saw this, and this is what I saw, and this is what I liked about it, or this is what I thought could be improved upon. It depersonalizes it just a little bit. So, but you also sometimes see people flinch, and they're trying to do their sort of best, just missed the Academy Award smile to someone else, and not look too upset about it. But it is important for everyone to be able to get a bit more comfortable with giving and receiving these sorts of
Yeah,
what
and
may
when
be
it
a
comes to receiving, the big thing I would say for people is to, when you know that you're in a situation, let's take the Toastmasters, for example, because it's a great situation. So you've done your speech and you've got to the place where people are going to give feedback. Best thing to do is keep breathing, and jot the things down as if you are taking notes for somebody else. try to stay out of your own pieces and then look at it later, so that you have some space with it, as opposed to allowing yourself to just be reactive to it. And know that it's coming. Where is it coming from? It's coming from a place that people really want you to see you succeed. They want to see you do better. And those are important pieces to keep in mind. It's like, what's the motivation of the person giving feedback? And if they don't have your best interests at heart, then you can just ignore that feedback, move on to the ones that do count.
Yeah, it does. The source matters with these things for sure. And I often find myself saying to people, always ask yourself, but definitely if you feel attacked or you feel uncomfortable, you should check in at least on what you think the other person's intention is in the situation. Because one thing is just even in asking yourself that makes you take a step back from the situation, helicopter out of it a little bit and observe it rather than just be in it. And then other options start to appear, and you also hopefully start to step out of that taking it personally thing and recognizing actually this isn't about you. When things get a bit prickly, it's about them. It's about them. It's a projection thing. That's what we tend to nearly always get a bit we miss it if we can't get into the habit of being able to take a step back in those sorts of situations. So we spend a lot of time worrying about what other people are going to say or how they're going to react. And you mentioned that before, and I think for a lot of people that can be even a reason to procrastinate, a good reason to put off these conversations for as long as possible. But what would your advice be to someone who's really trying to put off having one of those difficult or awkward conversations?
Well, depending on the level. So when I talk about difficult conversations, there's like, your level 1, which is, it's pretty mild. And then, then there's like the really intense, difficult conversations where it has potentially disastrous consequences. It could end your marriage. It could destroy your business. And so, something that's pretty minor, it's just, an upset customer that had bought a $97 package. Well, at most you're just going to give them a refund and let them go on their way. So it depends on that level. The preparation is going to be in getting to the space where it's like, okay, how can I come at this from a place of compassion, from a place of openness? And the more challenging that conversation is, the more inner work that needs to be done prior to. So to be looking at, okay, why is this so triggering for me? Why is this so challenging? And, if people need tools, happy to reach out to me and I can get you some tools for clearing out the emotional baggage so that it's easier for you to step into this conversation with that compassion, with that openness. And I would say, the more challenging, the more at risk, the more we're going to fire off our inner pieces around, I may not survive, or somebody's gonna leave me. I'm gonna be alone. So we start triggering off our core issues, which is what often makes it difficult, because the actual conversation is no more difficult depending on where it is in the scale, but our internal workings change the dynamic of how it feels for us. So the more critical, the more inner work that you need to do.
Yeah, I wonder. I know we probably all at some point in our life get to a point where we have to have a deep conversation, something a bit what I've often in the personal development world heard called authentic conversations. I always feel like, well, hopefully all of your conversations are authentic, but I get it. It's really just about, it's like, well, we need to get into some deeper stuff here, and those are sometimes the most difficult conversations to have, especially when it's with somebody who's very close to you, with a partner or a family member or someone a very good friend or the likes, where we just get to a point where you have to deal with some stuff and clear it. And nearly, I say probably in every, maybe just about every time that I have that, the fears of what could happen or what could go wrong are very, very far away from the reality of the situation, because I think in almost every case, it's even if there's been an initial bit of shock or upset, it's led to a conversation, and it's led to deeper understanding, or perhaps even enlightenment on both sides, to be able to figure out, well, where do we go from here, or what should happen next, or whatever needs to come up from the conversation. But certainly all the things that have been worried about beforehand probably most of the time just don't happen.
Yeah, and it reminds me of another tool, of course, and you've probably heard this before, but if you let yourself play out worst case scenario and you say, okay, what's the worst case scenario from this? And then, am I going to die if that happens? Can I survive it? Can I, right? And let yourself go through that. That's a way for discharging kind of the emotion from the anticipated event. And then from there, it's like when you can get to the place where you are willing to go into that conversation and ask them questions, not make your point, not get your point across, but are you willing to ask questions and find out about them? Then I would say, you're in a really good space to have a conversation that's going to have a good outcome, an outcome that allows both parties to go in the direction that they need to go, whether that is staying together or not.
Yeah. What would you advise or think about when you have to have a conversation with someone, or you feel that you need to have a conversation with somebody about something that they are genuinely not aware of about themselves? Maybe more of a personality trait than an odor situation in this circumstance, but something that people someone's just maybe being a bit too intrusive, overstepping boundaries. The kind of things, and I know you've had, because you told me about some of your experiences with people who do that overstepping thing.
Uh-huh.
How do you come back and approach that? Do you actually have to have the conversation, or is it just the boundary setting, or again probably situational? But
it is very situational, and it depends, on how close the relationship is. Somebody that's very peripheral, if it keeps happening, I'll just move them out, because there's not enough there for me to say I want to invest this kind of time. But somebody who's a closer friend, then it's opening that door of saying, hey, there's something that's really annoying me and I'd like to have a conversation with you. And that's always that, gut sinking for both people, right? Like, it's that piece. But
yeah, opening
the conversation with, hey, I adore you. And no matter, where this goes, I will still adore you. And then, here's what's bugging me. And, what else can we do? What can we do? And having that openness to the situation will allow for things to unfold. And again, it comes back to, you've got to stop running through the scenario in your head. Don't try to script the whole conversation, because if you're scripting the conversation, you're not listening to the other person, and the listening is the key. You have to hear what's going on for them.
I think it's probably always best to avoid that cliche that everybody hates to hear. I would just, we need to talk. Nobody wants to hear those words, do they? We need to talk.
And if you're on the receiving end of that, the best thing to do is like, okay, take a deep breath. Maybe it's not anything, what if it's not anything? What if it's not a big deal? What if it's something that it's like,
I'm happy to say my husband does it, and it's one of those things like, oh, what do we need to talk about? So I have no idea.
We're getting divorced.
Generally, it's never been anything bad.
Right. It's just, I really don't like the way you're stacking the dishwasher, or
something like that. Yeah.
It can be, but our ingrained reaction to that, we need to talk, is usually that. And again, like, I'm going to kind of generalize, but society-wise, the only times that people have said we need to talk means you're in trouble. All right. When your parents are like, we need to talk, you're like, oh, you found out about my smoking. Oh, damn it. Right? Like, there's something bigger. And so we get that ingrained into our system that means we're in trouble. And that's the piece that's like, okay, take a deep breath. It doesn't mean I'm in trouble. I am not going to die. I'm all right. And then, I wonder what this is about.
Mm. I think it was. I think as we have this chat, it's going to be important at some point to have maybe with you, but had to have another conversation about actually dealing with difficult people, so much as dealing with difficult conversations, because they're not necessarily the same thing, but the two can very much coincide from time to time. But yeah, please stay away from the we need to talk unless it is that. Because that's what everyone thinks. The first thing is like, okay, I've really screwed up, or we're going to break up, or we're going
or preface it like, hey, this is no big deal, but I just would like to talk about something. Like if you soften it that way of like, it's probably all in my head, I just need to vocalize it. Can you give me a few minutes? Can you listen to me? Those are kind of some ideas for softening. Can we talk?
Yeah. How much do you think mind reading plays a part of this? When we tend to think that we know what someone else is thinking or what they're likely to be thinking. do you know what I'm talking about?
The inappropriate and inaccurate mind reading? Yeah. It's none of your business what the other person thinks.
Right.
And if you want to know, ask them. Don't assume. Like that's probably the biggest thing that gets people whirling in their brain is like, oh, I think they're thinking this, and oh, they're going to think I'm this, and it's just none of your business. So get out of there, because the only way you're going to know is if they actually tell you, and they may or may not accurately tell you, and that's up to them.
Yeah. No, this show is essentially about coaching, and I know a lot of people, because I've designed it to be a lot of people, hopefully, who will tune in, are going to be working as coaches as well. And so I think one of the things that I do want to get to with you, and I don't want to take up too much of your day, but one thing that I think is important to get to is that a lot of coaches do not want to have difficult conversations with their clients. They kind of want to be their friend, and and they don't want to actually, I think coaches can often see what's really going on with somebody, and maybe sometimes you don't want to be the person to deliver that, because it might not be what the client wants to hear, and there could be money on the line there with that. It's like, okay, well, clients are paying you, you give them some news that they don't want to hear, or some feedback that's a bit on the nose for them. Maybe they're going to back away or just decide they don't want to work with you anymore. What would you say to that? Because I'm sure you have some thoughts on that.
So a lot of this comes back to your original setup, just like when I was a dominatrix and we had the initial conversation, which would usually be about 4 hours. In that time is when you negotiate. That's when you set up the parameters and you say, okay, so what happens? What happens when I trigger you? And I would talk to my clients and like, I'm going to trigger you at some point. Pardon me. At some point, something that I'm going to say is going to hit a hot spot. And the secret is that rather than running away and making me wrong, we lean in, because those are the gold moments. Those are the moments that transform your life. And so in my work, I set that up as a parameter in that here's how we're going to deal with triggers. So, and I give my clients full permission. You are allowed to tell me to fuck off. You're allowed to give me the finger. You're allowed to do all of those things. And then you come back to the table. Yeah. And that's the thing, is that recognizing right from the get-go, I think will stop a lot of that bad behavior if you talk about it right at the beginning, because good coaching should trigger people. It should, because we want to bring that up and out. We want to change the behavior. So if we're not, poking at the bear, are you actually doing your clients a true service? And if you're not comfortable with that, then, start role playing with people to get comfortable with making people uncomfortable. And this is where I have an advantage as a coach. I'm good. If people are uncomfortable, if they're squirming in their seat, I'm like, woo, it's kind of exciting.
Right? There's something going on. Right. This is the thing. It's like if you're giving somebody feedback that they're just like, whatever, it's like you're not hitting anything. So okay, well that's not getting to them. They're getting people to start their faces start reddening up, or they start getting a bit angry or a bit more defensive. You're getting into something that needs to be dealt with. And this is one of the things I often find myself reminding my clients of. And I don't think I'm probably fairly calm with most of my clients, I'd say, but I do I am honest with them, and I will generally go through the whole thing of saying to them, okay, this is clearly bringing some stuff up for you, and I encourage you to be grateful for that because it means there's something to deal with.
Yeah.
And so once you have awareness that there's something to deal with, you can do the work of dealing with it. And so, I don't say thank you to me for getting you annoyed or whatever, but but just to get into a state of gratitude, because there's so many things in life that can be those triggers, not necessarily just a coach. That if you do get into a mindset of just being, oh, thank you, that brings some stuff up for me that clearly I've got some issues around that I could do with working on or working through, that it is actually a gift. We don't always feel that at the moment. So, but I in my life, as much as possible, try to be that myself and say, okay, some stuff's coming up from that. And thank you for this situation or this like annoying person or situation that has brought this up, because I need to deal with something here.
And it's great. Like I love that you brought that up, because it's really good conditioning for the rest of our lives. So if we can, when we're coaching people and we're teaching them to lean in to the triggers, to be grateful for them, to like, okay, see, like this is what's going to bring about the gold, then we're imprinting for that to happen in the rest of their life too. And this is the thing, is like, we're always going to get triggered. We're always going to have things that annoy us. And if we can get to the place where we're like, all right, it's kind of uncomfortable, but I'm feeling grateful, then we get to enjoy more of our life, because there are, unfortunately, a lot of things that are annoying, but being able to shift that to say, oh, hey, I welcome that. I welcome all of that, all of the things, not just the good stuff, but the bad and the ugly and all in between. Then all of our life has this underlying thread of, hey, I kind of enjoy this. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, it does actually get to being a little more playful, because if anything, I think if you get into this whole like defensiveness or some really strong anger or whatever it is that you may go to once you feel triggered, it does inhibit your ability to be able to think clearly and respond clearly. Whereas if you start to recognize that's coming up and you take that step back and say, all right, some stuff's coming up here, and thank you, I'm grateful for this, immediately you're already putting yourself in a situation where you have a bit more flexibility. You have a choice of how you react or respond to this. You are noticing rather than being in it.
Yes.
And that is really an important element, to be able to pick the direction, at least have an opportunity to ask yourself, what would actually be the best way to respond to this? What's going to deliver the best outcome here? Not just what's going to make me feel better in the moment, lash my tongue at you and see how deep I can cut, but what's actually going to create the best outcome? I had a situation a while back where I ended up, I was walking my parents' dog. This is a few years ago, because she's not with us anymore, but I was walking my parents' dog for them. And I started having this conversation with this old lady who was in a wheelchair, and she was accompanied by, I'm assuming, her daughters. Anyway, it was all very pleasant. She was saying how much she liked the dog and all that. And then she insulted me. And I was like, basically saying how pretty the dog was and how not pretty I was. And thank you for that. The first thing I wanted to do was like say something like, okay, well, at least I'm not a death's door or something, something mean. But I didn't. I thought to myself, okay, well, I'm just noticing that, that's not very nice. But I don't feel that insecure about myself. So I think, okay, well, I do think she was mean, but then also that thing in my head is going on, well, she may have some sort of dementia that I have no idea, or she may just be a very nasty person. Either way, what's the best way for me to respond to this? And this was like, okay, well, have a nice rest of your evening and walk off. Because if it was that the intention was to be mean, me not biting and getting upset by it was the best response.
Absolutely.
If it was that she actually had dementia or something else going on, then me being a bit kind and not getting into it was also the best response to have. Me being nasty back would only have made me feel better in a moment, but I can guarantee you the rest of that night I'd have been like, oh no, I feel really bad. I should never have said that.
That's it. It's not worth it. It's,
No.
it's like eating a 5-pound chocolate bar and then you gotta, we're sweated out of the gym for the next 2 months. Right? Like, it's just not worth the pain.
It's not worth it. Absolutely. So I want to sort of circle back to, we're talking about the coaching situations. What if, as a coach, you haven't set up that sort of relationship initially, but you in a situation where you do need to deliver some authentic feedback? Is it too late, or can you still set up those parameters?
I think again, it's going to depend on the situation, whether it needs to be immediate. If it doesn't need to be immediate, this is kind of a long-term ongoing situation, then I would say, let's take some time to set up the scenario and, educate your client about, hey, when things are triggering, this is a chance for us to grow. It's a chance for us to lean into it. It's a chance to build resiliency and, take them back to a time when they had that experience, find a connection to, okay, I had something that was really challenging, and by leaning into it, I got these gifts. When you can connect them to that, then you can start to shift them in the fact of, like, good coaching can often stir things up for people, and it brings that gift forward. And the nice thing is that, if you trigger your clients, not intentionally, I don't intentionally try to trigger people, but if they're triggered in that moment, I'm also there for them and able to walk them through and untangle it. So it's brilliant. And this is the thing you want to educate people, is that this is ideal. Like, if we get to something and you're really, things are really triggered, hopefully it's not in that last 2 minutes of the session, right? But if you can then you can work through it, and you can use all of your tools to move your client into that space of gratitude for the uncomfortable moment. That whole process is going to set the stage for being able to say, okay, listen, I see a pattern going on here. Are you willing to listen?
Yeah. Have you ever come across a book, or and there's some I think there's still some video and stuff around as well, called Provocative Therapy? It was a therapist, an Irish therapist called Frank Farrelly. He's no longer with us, but his work lives on, although it's not very well known about. But it was developed into a coaching style as well from a guy called Jaap Hollander. But again, I haven't heard much from Jaap Hollander for a while, so I don't know what the situation is with that. But really, the whole idea or principle behind it is like poking the bear. It is like doing the stuff that's going to trigger those responses with your clients to get it up there and be able to push through it with them.
Yeah.
And that was the whole principle of it. Really fascinating books. Yeah.
I'll have to check that out, because it sounds
Yeah.
like there's like an element of that with what I do, for sure. Because there is, I do intentionally, like, so one of the tools that I use is a statement clearing process, and I get people to say a statement so that it brings up the emotion, and then we get it discharged from the system. And that is a poking the bear. I had somebody recently call it exposure therapy. I'm like, oh, actually, that's a good way to think of it. So I could see some benefit. I'm curious to check. So provocative therapy, is that what it is?
Provocative Therapy is the name of the book that I got about it. There is some stuff online on I think if you look it up online, you can find the website, if it's still up, that had some video and some stuff in there. The book isn't I don't think it's still in print, but you can probably still get hold of a copy. The provocative coaching, I think, is certainly should be a lot easier to get hold of a copy of that. But it's based on Frank Farrelly's provocative therapy as well. But as a coaching tool, I think it's really important, and one that I don't think nearly enough coaches do. And one of the reasons why I've always had a really hard time finding coaches is because it is actually quite hard to find those people who will give you direct feedback, who will be willing to push your buttons, because everyone wants to be nice.
I just want to be nice.
But like I said earlier, it doesn't help. It's like you can be as nice as you want, and that we can have a lovely conversation and feel like, oh, that was nice. But it actually doesn't help. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't deal with anything. It doesn't get you processing anything. No. So poking the bear a bit is is essential, really, to some degree.
I
You
think
need to be a bit of an
so.
antagonist as a coach.
Yay! I'm doing it right.
Hopefully I am too. But I think that no, I do think there's always room for more. I don't like this whole sort of tough love thing to the degree of doing it just for the sake of being mean. I don't like that.
Yeah.
It's like this shouldn't be just for the sake of it, not just so you can call yourself what you might think is a badass. It's like well, no, a badass is someone more like you. Like it really comes from the heart and actually live it, and you are it, rather than someone who's just like. There's that chain restaurant in the US, maybe it's in Canada as well. Dick's Last Resort. Do you know the one where
I
you
don't
go
know.
along and the staff insult you? It's like that's the theme. The staff are really insulting.
I love it.
And so I think I was in Baltimore the first time, and I went in there with a whole group of this is when I was cabin crew. Went in there with a whole group of crew, mainly because we couldn't find anywhere else to go, and most of us refused to go to Hooters. So we went to Dick's Last Resort, not knowing, none of us knew what the theme of this place was. And then we start getting insulted by all these waiting staff. It's like, okay. Then at some point, one of them had to say to us, that is what this restaurant is about. It's our theme, it's our thing. I was like, yeah, well, you need to cool it. Otherwise, we're just going to go somewhere else.
Well,
It's
or
like,
you need to prep people, right? There needs to be a sign at the
yeah.
front door to say, listen, this is what this is about. If you
Yeah,
don't
we're
already
like,
know. Because
treat us
I
like
actually,
tourists who have
I
no
was at
idea.
a restaurant in Vancouver. There's a breakfast place like that. And it's run by a gay couple. And just the waiters that they just have like the best one-liners, but going in. And so my girlfriend and I went in, and they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, girls, we don't have any pitcher menus for you blondies." Right? It was just like little quips, but when it can be very funny. If you don't know that's what you're getting in for, it feels mean and rude.
Yeah, exactly that. So no, I'm not for being a dick just for the sake of being a dick. Especially if you're in a coaching or professional situation. It's not hard ass. It's not boss like. It's actually probably only really potentially serves to someone's own ego because they want to think of themselves as being some tough guy or tough woman, and it's actually really unprofessional in my opinion.
Yeah.
But there are those times, and I think it's much more impactful if you're not like that all the time, hopefully, then it's much more impactful when you are. When you do it because it serves a purpose and because it's serving whoever you're in conversation with, it's a big wake up. Whereas if you know someone's like that, it's not.
Yeah, when you have a strong relationship built with the person, and this is part of where I really like to work with people long term, because 3 months you're just building up that connection, that point where you can really call people to the carpet. And so when I work with people, over a couple of years, then I can really, like, in 5 minutes, get right to the point and say, listen, this is what's going on, this is what needs to shift, and move it out. So you do need some rapport before you start calling people to the carpet.
Yeah, definitely. You need to establish some boundaries, some connection, and I will ask for permission. Clients, ex-clients of mine will be able to tell you that if I feel that we're doing the kind of coaching where I need to be able to do that, I'm going to ask them for permission and say, sometimes I'm gonna kick your ass on this, and I want your permission to do that. Is that okay? Like, yeah, absolutely. That's what I want. That's what I need. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, we're all good.
And then you can remind them when they balk at it and say, you gave me permission, remember?
I remember having a client one time who honestly thought that I was going to get on a plane and fly over to England and literally kick her ass. I was like, no, no, but we are going to talk about this, okay? It's going to be more of a conversational ass kicking, if that's okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was funny. So I had to do it, otherwise I think you're going to be buying a plane ticket. So, okay, no, but
who has that kind of time?
To some degree, I'm kind of glad that you think that, but I'm also not that mean. It's like I've never actually inflicted violence on any of my clients for any reason at all, and neither should any other coaches, I hope.
Let's hope not.
Let's hope not. So Dana, this has been a really enjoyable conversation. There's so much more we could talk about, but I'm also very wary of time here as well. I think definitely we'll have you back in the future for some more conversations. And I know there's plenty for us to talk about.
I know.
And I'm much more with this show. I definitely want to have more regular people on as well, because I think it's kind of a community, like coaching, personal development, professional development. Well, it's a big old community, and we can all help each other out a lot, and also hopefully some value for people who are just interested in into personal and professional development for themselves too. For those who do want to find out more about you and what you do, and all the amazing things you teach and work with people on, how can people do that?
So I have the notoriety being the only Dana Pharant in the world, so it is super easy to find me. Website or LinkedIn would be my two places that I would direct you to.
Excellent. And LinkedIn is a good place to connect with you, as you post quite a bit of stuff on there. You're on Clubhouse as well at the moment.
Yes. Just getting started.
Regardless of our feelings about it, you're on there at the moment. I'm on there too. For anyone who wants to connect, me on Clubhouse is at John A. Ball. You can connect with me there. Connect with Dana as well. I didn't get enough time before the show to put her to think about putting her details.
You just look up my name, honestly.
Yeah, you'll find it. But thank you to everyone who has tuned into the show today. We've had a few people coming and going on the live, and the show will be coming out live soon. I'm going to be doing all the shows live now, so if you get a chance to tune in with us live, feel free to ask questions in the question box in future, and post your questions for Dana, James, whoever is coming on the show, and we'll do our very best to answer them for you. But for now, this is Points of Change wrapping up for today. Thank you, Dana, and for the rest of you, have a wonderful rest of your day and an amazing week.